The drive to the police station was unusually quiet. Officer David Parker glanced in his rearview mirror, watching the well-dressed man in the backseat. Despite being handcuffed, he sat there with remarkable dignity, occasionally looking at his watch and sighing deeply. At the station, the fluorescent lights highlighted the water droplets still clinging to their clothes. Officer Parker led his arrestee to the processing area, where a desk sergeant looked up from his computer with mild interest. The usual crowd of early morning arrests, mostly drunk drivers and petty thieves, watched curiously as this man in an expensive suit walked past them. "I need to make that phone call now," the man said firmly but politely. Officer Parker nodded and led him to the phone after the initial booking process. As the man dialed, his hands slightly trembling despite his composed demeanor, Parker stood nearby, following standard procedure. "Yes, this is me," the man spoke into the phone. "I won't be making it to the introduction meeting." "Why?" "Well, because I'm currently under arrest." He paused, listening to the response. "No, this isn't a joke. Could you please get the chief on the line? It's urgent." Officer Parker's ears perked up at the mention of the chief. He watched as the man's expression changed from concern to slight relief. "Yes, I'm at the downtown precinct. Thank you." He hung up the phone and turned to Parker with what almost looked like a hint of amusement in his eyes. Within 15 minutes, the station's atmosphere shifted dramatically. The chief of police burst through the doors, his face flushed and tie slightly askew. The moment he spotted the arrested man, his eyes widened in recognition, and color drained from his face. "Oh my God," the chief muttered, rushing forward. "Someone get those cuffs off him immediately." He turned to Officer Parker, who stood confused and increasingly worried. "Officer, do you have any idea who you just arrested?" Before anyone could answer, more high-ranking officers began flooding into the station. The arrested man stood calmly as someone removed his handcuffs, rubbing his wrists gently. The chief was now profusely apologizing, his usual commanding presence replaced by nervous energy. "Everyone," the chief announced to the now silent room, "I'd like you to meet our new police commissioner." He was supposed to be introduced at this morning's department meeting. He turned to Officer Parker, whose face had turned pale. "And you, officer, just arrested him." The new commissioner raised his hand, silencing the murmurs that had broken out across the room. He straightened his still damp suit jacket and looked directly at Officer Parker, who felt his career flash before his eyes. But instead of anger, there was something else in the commissioner's expression, something that looked surprisingly like respect. "Please, everyone, return to your duties," the commissioner said calmly. "Officer Parker, would you join me in the conference room? Chief, you too." As they walked away from the stunned audience of officers and civilians, the commissioner added quietly, "I believe we have some interesting matters to discuss." The morning's simple traffic stop had just turned into something that would change not only Officer Parker's career, but the entire department's future. As they entered the conference room, Parker couldn't help but wonder if this would be his last day as a police officer, or the beginning of something unexpected. The conference room felt unusually tense as Officer Parker sat down, his uniform still damp from the morning rain. The new commissioner took his seat at the head of the table, while the chief nervously adjusted his tie, looking between the two men. First, the commissioner began, his voice steady and clear. "I want to hear exactly what happened from your perspective, Officer Parker." He leaned back in his chair, giving the young officer his full attention. Parker swallowed hard, but maintained his composure. He explained everything: the speeding Mercedes, the expired registration, and how the arrest followed standard procedure. As he spoke, the commissioner nodded occasionally, his expression unreadable. "Chief," the commissioner turned suddenly, "would you excuse us for a moment?" The chief looked surprised, but quickly left the room. The tension grew thicker as the door closed behind him. "Now, Officer Parker," the commissioner leaned forward, "do you know why I wanted to speak with you privately?" Parker shook his head, his heart pounding. because what happened this morning was exactly what I needed to see. The commissioner stood up and walked to the window, watching the rain continue to fall. I've been appointed to make changes in this department, to ensure that every officer treats every citizen the same way, regardless of their position, their car, or their suit. He turned back to face Parker. You did exactly that. Relief flooded through Parker's body, but confusion quickly followed. The commissioner continued, when you pulled me over, you didn't see a future commissioner. You saw a citizen breaking the law. When I tried to talk my way out of it, you stood firm. When you found the expired registration, you followed procedure. He returned to his seat, a slight smile forming on his face. Do you know how many officers might have looked the other way once they saw the expensive car? Or backed off when I mentioned the important meeting? But you didn't. Parker found his voice at last. Sir, I was just doing my job. Exactly, the commissioner replied. That's precisely what I want every officer in this department to say. To do their job, regardless of who they're dealing with. He paused, reaching into his still damp jacket. Which is why I want you to help me implement some changes. Parker's eyes widened as the commissioner pulled out a small notebook. I've been taking notes since I was arrested. About how you handled the situation, your professionalism, even how you tried to protect my suit from the rain while putting on the handcuffs. These are the kinds of details that matter. The rain outside had finally stopped, and sunlight began breaking through the clouds. As it streamed through the window, Parker realized this wasn't the end of his career, it was a new beginning. The commissioner's arrest, which had seemed like a disaster just hours ago, was transforming into an opportunity that would reshape not just his future, but the entire department's approach to equal justice. The aftermath of the arrest spread through the police department like wildfire. Officers gathered in small groups during their breaks, discussing how Officer Parker had unknowingly arrested the new commissioner. Some saw it as a career-ending mistake, while others admired his unwavering dedication to the rules. Parker noticed the whispers and stares as he walked through the precinct halls. His fellow officers treated him differently now, some with newfound respect, others with a hint of distance, as if his connection to the commissioner made him somehow untouchable. But Parker kept his head down and continued doing his job, just as he always had. One morning, about a week after the incident, Parker found a memo on his desk. The commissioner wanted to see him again. As he walked to the office, memories of that rainy morning flooded back. This time, though, the commissioner wasn't in handcuffs. He sat behind his desk, reviewing files. Come in, Officer Parker, the commissioner called out, gesturing to a chair. I've been watching how you've handled all the attention this past week. Not a single complaint, no boasting, just steady work. That's exactly what I was hoping to see. He pulled out a thick folder and opened it on his desk. I've reviewed your service record. 5 years on the force, consistent performance evaluations, and a remarkable ability to de-escalate tense situations. But what interests me most is how you've handled traffic stops, especially with people who think they're above the law. Parker shifted in his chair, remembering some of those encounters. The commissioner continued, Your body camera footage shows a pattern. Whether it's a teenager in a beat-up car or a businessman in a luxury vehicle, you treat everyone the same way. That's rare, Officer Parker. Rarer than you might think. The commissioner stood up and walked to a wall map of the city. We're making changes in how we train our officers. The old ways of doing things, they're not working anymore. People don't trust us like they used to. But your approach, treating everyone with the same respect while holding them to the same standards, that's what we need more of. He turned back to Parker with a serious expression. I want you to help train our new recruits. Share your experiences, teach them your methods, starting with how you handled my arrest. A slight smile crossed his face. Though maybe leave out the part where you didn't recognize your new boss. For Parker, this was more than just a promotion or recognition. It was a chance to make a real difference in how police officers approached their duties. The embarrassing incident in the rain had somehow transformed into an opportunity to shape the future of law enforcement in their city. As he left the commissioner's office that day, Parker realized that sometimes the most significant changes come from the most unexpected moments, even from accidentally arresting your new boss on a rainy Tuesday morning. The private meeting between Officer Parker and the commissioner took place in a small cafe downtown, away from the watchful eyes at the precinct. Steam rose from their coffee cups as morning sunlight streamed through the windows. "I wanted to meet somewhere less formal," the commissioner explained, stirring his coffee. "Sometimes the best conversations happen outside office walls." He pulled out a worn leather notebook, its pages filled with handwritten notes. "Your arrest of me wasn't just about following procedure," he continued. "It was about dignity. Even when you were arresting me, you showed respect. That's what I want to discuss." The commissioner paused, watching the group of school children walk past the cafe window. "Tell me about your background, Officer Parker. What made you become a police officer?" The question caught Parker off guard. He'd expected a formal discussion about department policies, not personal history. Parker took a sip of coffee, gathering his thoughts. "My grandfather was a beat cop," he began. "He always said that a badge doesn't make you better than anyone else. It just means you have a bigger responsibility to do what's right." The commissioner nodded, jotting something in his notebook. "And when you arrested me, what was going through your mind?" "Honestly," Parker replied, "I was thinking about how to handle the situation with respect, regardless of who you were. Rich or poor, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity during an arrest." The commissioner closed his notebook. "That's exactly why I wanted this meeting. We're going to make changes in the department, starting with how we train officers in community interactions. But first, I want to understand your approach better." They spent the next hour discussing real situations Parker had faced: difficult arrests, tense confrontations, moments where respect made all the difference. The commissioner listened intently, occasionally making notes. "Here's what I'm thinking," the commissioner finally said. "We create a new training program, not just procedures and protocols, but real-world scenarios, teaching officers how to maintain authority while showing respect. And I want you to help design it." Parker was stunned. "Me? But I'm just a patrol officer." The commissioner smiled. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who never plan to teach. Your arrest of me proved that. Now, I want you to help other officers learn what you already know, that true authority comes from respect, not fear." As they left the cafe, both men knew this conversation would lead to something bigger than either had imagined. Sometimes it takes an unexpected arrest to start a revolution in police training. The changes started rolling out gradually in the department. The first noticeable difference was in the morning briefings, where the commissioner introduced a new approach to community policing. Officer Parker stood beside him, sharing real-life examples from his years on the force. "It's not just about enforcing the law," Parker explained to a room full of officers. "It's about how we enforce it." He pulled up dashcam footage from various traffic stops, including his now famous arrest of the commissioner. The room fell silent as they watched each interaction unfold. Training sessions became more interactive. Instead of just reading from manuals, officers now participated in role-playing scenarios. They practiced handling difficult situations while maintaining professionalism and respect. The commissioner often dropped in unexpectedly, observing and taking notes. The changes weren't always easy. Some veteran officers resisted the new approach, claiming it would make them look weak. But then the results started showing. Civilian complaints dropped by 30% in the first 3 months. Community feedback became more positive. Parker worked closely with the commissioner, refining the training program. They focused on real scenarios: traffic stops gone wrong, heated arguments turned peaceful, arrests made with dignity. The story of the commissioner's arrest became a teaching tool, showing how proper procedure and respect could work together. One particular success story stood out. A rookie officer, fresh from the new training program, managed to peacefully resolve a tense situation with a group of angry protesters. When asked how he kept his cool, he mentioned Parker's training sessions. "You taught us that respect goes both ways," the rookie told Parker. "When people feel heard and treated fairly, even in tough situations, they're more likely to cooperate." The commissioner overheard this conversation and smiled knowingly. The department started receiving requests from other precincts to share their training methods. What began as one unexpected arrest was now influencing police departments across the state. The commissioner's vision, combined with Parker's practical experience, was creating real change. Local news stations picked up the story. They interviewed community members who noticed the difference in police interactions. Business owners, residents, and even former critics of the department admitted things were improving. The tide was turning, one respectful interaction at a time. As months passed, the partnership between Officer Parker and the commissioner grew stronger. They worked together daily, turning their accidental first meeting into something meaningful for the entire police force. The commissioner often invited Parker to community meetings where they shared their unique story. "I could have been angry that day," the commissioner would say, "but instead, I witnessed exactly what good policing looks like." Parker would then demonstrate the techniques he used, showing how respect and authority could work hand in hand. Their story became a symbol of positive change. Local schools invited them to speak to students about law enforcement. Parker found himself connecting with young people who'd previously distrusted police officers. He shared stories from his patrols, showing how treating everyone with dignity made a real difference. The commissioner noticed Parker's natural teaching ability. "You have a gift," he told Parker one evening after a particularly successful community meeting. "You make people understand that law enforcement isn't about power. It's about service." They developed a mentorship program where experienced officers like Parker worked closely with newer recruits. The program focused on real-world situations, teaching officers how to handle difficult moments while maintaining their professionalism. One day, a young officer approached Parker after training. "You know," she said, "when I first heard about how you arrested the commissioner, I thought it was just a funny story. But now I understand. It's about doing what's right, no matter who's involved." The commissioner often reflected on that rainy morning. "Sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected moments," he'd say during training sessions. "Officer Parker could have made exceptions that day because I was well-dressed or driving an expensive car. Instead, he showed what equal justice really means." Parker's approach began spreading to other departments. Officers from neighboring cities came to observe their training methods. What started as an embarrassing arrest had grown into a movement, changing how police officers interacted with their communities. Through it all, Parker remained humble. He continued his regular patrols, treating each person he met with the same respect he'd shown the commissioner that rainy morning. The only difference now was that his actions were helping shape a new generation of police officers. The ceremony hall buzzed with excitement on a bright summer morning. A year had passed since that fateful rainy day, and now Officer Parker stood nervously adjusting his uniform. The department's annual recognition ceremony was about to begin, but this year felt different. The commissioner stepped up to the podium, surveying the crowd of officers, family members, and community leaders. He began with a story that everyone now knew by heart, the tale of his own arrest. But today, he shared new details that many hadn't heard before. "When Officer Parker arrested me that morning," the commissioner spoke, his voice carrying through the hall, "he did something remarkable. He showed me that our department had officers who truly believed in equal justice. Today, we're not just promoting him to sergeant, we're celebrating what he represents." The audience listened intently as the commissioner described the changes of the past year. Crime rates had dropped. Community trust had improved. Complaints against officers had decreased significantly. All because one officer had done his job properly on a rainy morning. "Officer Parker," the commissioner called out, "please step forward." As Parker walked to the stage, He saw familiar faces in the crowd. There was the rookie officer who'd successfully handled the protest, the business owners from downtown who'd noticed the positive changes, and even some former critics of the department who now supported their new approach. The commissioner picked up the sergeant's badge. "This promotion isn't just about rank," he explained. "It's about recognizing the kind of leadership we need in modern law enforcement. Leadership that comes from respect, fairness, and unwavering commitment to doing what's right." As the commissioner pinned the new badge on Parker's uniform, he added something unexpected. "You know, I still have that expired registration in my office. I framed it as a reminder that sometimes our biggest opportunities come disguised as problems." The crowd laughed, but everyone understood the deeper meaning. Parker's actions had sparked a transformation in the department, proving that one person's commitment to doing the right thing could create lasting change. After the ceremony, officers and community members gathered to congratulate the new sergeant. Many shared stories about how the department's new approach had made a difference in their lives. Parker realized that his simple traffic stop had grown into something much bigger than himself. 5 years had passed since that rainy morning traffic stop, and the story had become a cornerstone of police training across the country. Police academies nationwide now included the case study of Officer Parker's arrest of his future boss in their curriculum, but its impact went far beyond a simple teaching tool. The commissioner stood at the National Law Enforcement Conference, sharing how one traffic stop had revolutionized their department. "We call it the Parker Principle," he explained to the packed auditorium. "Equal treatment under the law, regardless of status, appearance, or circumstance." Statistics showed the lasting impact. Their department had become a model for others, with dramatically improved community relations and reduced crime rates. Other cities had adopted their training methods, seeing similar positive results. Back at their local precinct, now Captain Parker walked the halls, mentoring a new generation of officers. The framed expired registration still hung in the commissioner's office, but now it was surrounded by awards and recognition letters from other departments nationwide. Young recruits would gather around Parker during break times, eager to hear the story firsthand. "The most important lesson," he'd tell them, "isn't about the arrest itself. It's about what happened afterward, how one moment of doing the right thing can spark real change." The department had transformed. Officers now regularly received thank you notes from citizens they'd ticketed or arrested, appreciating their professional and respectful approach. Community meetings, once tense and confrontational, had become collaborative planning sessions. The commissioner and Parker still met regularly at that same cafe where they'd first planned their changes. They'd watch new officers interact with the community, seeing their vision in action. "You know," the commissioner would say, "some people might think getting arrested was the worst way to start my job. But it turned out to be the best possible beginning." Local schools now had regular Coffee with Cops programs, where students could talk openly with officers about their concerns. The barrier between law enforcement and the community had slowly dissolved, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. As another rainy morning came around, Parker stood watching his officers head out for their shifts. The story that began with an awkward arrest had grown into a movement, changing not just one department, but the very nature of modern policing. It proved that sometimes the most powerful changes start with one person simply doing their job the right way.